Welcome to episode 2 of the What's on Tap NBA podcast. This is Wilder Adams. Excited to bring back an episode right at the midpoint of the season. I just drove across the country, started the semester, school started, so lots going on. So wish I was able to get one out earlier, but now that we're settled in, I think it's going to be much better. But I'm so excited to be back. I was trying to get a guest on for the past week or so, but unfortunately it hasn't lined up yet, but hopefully it does soon. And, I think at this point in the season, it's great because we're kind of approaching All-Star game and we kind of know what everybody is right now. Not that everybody is who they're going to be in April, but we kind of know who's going to be good, who has a chance to be great, and who's bad. And, we have an idea of the award race. Now we have an idea of things. So now we know exactly what to track instead of, kind of just trying to dig up as much data as possible. It's kind of easier to know where to find it. So it's definitely a pretty good time of the year. And so today I want to first of all introduce the first things that we're going to talk about throughout this episode. To start out, I want to talk about the last 5 number 1 overall picks because I think we are possibly on an historical trend in that remark. We're going to do like a sort of a power ranking, but only for the teams I deem as contenders. And just a foreshadow, there's 7 of them. There's 7. Yep, 7. And it's not what it's going to be at the end of the year, but it is definitely where they stand right now based on their readiness. And I want to talk about the OKC young core today versus the notable one 10 years ago with KD, Harden, Russ. I got midseason NBA awards. And, of course, even though this is sort of old news now, Siakam to Indiana. We're going to talk about that. So a lot of going on, and that wasn't in chronological order, by the way, because we are actually going to get started right away with the NBA awards. And I was going to give you guys an explanation, maybe mention a couple other notable candidates. But, yeah, so I'm going to give you guys my quick awards right away to start this episode. And, wait, it's loading. Okay. So, first of all, my MVP this year, to start out, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the OKC Thunder. I know he's not the favorite right now. He's usually around 2nd or 3rd on NBA rankings, but Shai, in my opinion, is the MVP. If Joel Embiid was on track to be eligible for the MVP award, I'd pick him. You can't ignore 35, 12, and 5. I understand. I am not trying to play Mr. Smart Guy. I am not overthinking this. If the season goes at this rate, Embiid is on track to play 62 games. That is why he's not the MVP. Shai, though, he's been right there with Embiid, though. He really has, and he's been available. Oklahoma City guys, look, they do have one of the best young cores in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. And I am not saying that Shai is carrying a bad team or an immature team. But there is something to be said about being a top 2 seed on a team that's that young and being the face of that team. There is a weight to talk about the leadership that requires. And Shai's is at the front of that. And you look at what he's doing on both sides of the ball. There's not a better 2-way perimeter player in the league this year. He is 99th percentile on an estimated plus minus on both sides of the floor. He leads the NBA in steals. Shai has been a legitimate, one of the best high usage defenders in the NBA. And offensively, 32 points a game, 6 assists, leads the NBA in 30-point games. He doesn't turn over the ball. He's shooting over 62 shooting, so he's efficient. He doesn't turn over the ball. He's been consistent. He's playmaking. He's getting buckets. He is the most efficient first and second level scoring guard in the NBA this year. No guards playing better. No guards playing better in the NBA right now than Shai. And when you compare what he's doing this year to what KD did at age 25, you can argue that Shai's been better than the KD that went to the finals. I'm not saying he is. As a matter of fact, I don't think he's going to be better than KD because I do question Shai's game aging a little bit. But when you look at it, he's got a higher PER, higher efficiency field goal percentage, higher true shooting percentage, higher win shares per 48. Shai's just been excellent, and there's not any player eligible for the award or on track to be eligible for the award right now playing better. So I have to consider that. Nobody's playing better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander based on volume of how often he's playing. So I think Shea is the MVP. Rookie of the year, it's Victor Wembanyama. Chet Holmgren was my rookie of the year most of the way, but with how amazing Victor's been his last 10 games, I mean, on a minute restriction, he is giving you nearly 35, 12, 5, and 7 blocks per 36 minutes on 64 true shooting in his last 10 games. As a rookie, Victor Wembanyama has been a star lately. And it's not like he had a slow start either. He's been excellent for a rookie right away, and he's only building up. Chet is special, and he has a case, but I don't believe he's a better basketball player than Victor Wembanyama right now, and I think that's what it comes down to. I think if Victor didn't recently ascend, I think Chet's the easy rookie of the year because the efficiency, the production, and the winningness, those things matter. But with how well Victor's playing, I'm not going to put him at fault for being on the San Antonio Spurs. I'm not going to fault him for that. So I think Victor's rookie of the year. DPOI, it's Rudy Gobert. He's top 5 in blocks, top 2 in rebounds. He is the anchor of the number 1 defense in the NBA by a country mile. Rudy Gobert is back. Rudy Gobert is back to being a top 25 player in the world. And Anthony Edwards is the star of Minnesota. Rudy Gobert, you can argue, is the anchor of Minnesota. He is their most valuable defensive player, the most valuable defensive player in the league. And he's just, I mean, you watch it. People are going to say, like, well, he's not that versatile. He is versatile defensively. You watch Minnesota this year, when he has actual reliable perimeter defenders around him, how freeing it is for him because he is attacking passing lanes. He is guarding in isolation. People are like, can you play him off the court defensively? We just saw him against the Clippers the other day. He was guarding Kawhi. He was guarding Paul George, and he did a fine job at that. Rudy Gobert is the best defensive player in the world. 6th man of the year. Let's continue the Timberwolves bias. It's Naz Reid. Naz Reid. And I get it. The 6th man of the year award has kind of become the inefficient 18-point per game one-way shooting guard award. It really has. Because, look, Tim Hardaway Jr. is very good. Very good. Awful defender. Inefficient. You can mention the other candidates. Very similar. Naz Reid is the best bench player in the NBA this year. If Cat's the best shooting big in the league, Naz Reid's been second this year. 41% on 5 attempts from 3 a game. He's been elite as a shooter for a big. He is the best ball handling big in the league. He is finishing. If Naz Reid was on most other NBA teams where he's able to play 30 minutes, he's averaging nearly 20 a game. And his defense has gotten better this year. He's blocking more shots recently. He is switchable. His feet are great. He is engaged, and he's a part of why the Minnesota is the number 1 defense in the NBA. Not saying he's an elite defender, but he's better than the other candidates. He is more efficient than the other candidates. And if he was given the volume, I think he's more productive. Naz Reid's playing with 2 All-NBA centers, so it's hard to give him 30 minutes a game. But for the 22.6 minutes a game he's getting, there's no better bench player in the NBA right now. Naz Reid is 6th man of the year. Most improved player, Jalen Johnson. Last year, barely in the rotation in Atlanta, 5 points a game. Now he's up to 15, 8, and 3. One of the biggest transition threats. He is a creative playmaker. He's 6'10". He's really good. And he's got legitimate star potential. And we've known this for a long time with him because before college, he was considered a potential top 5 pick. Throughout most of the draft process, he was considered a potential top 5 pick. But he hasn't been able to put it together. He fell to 20 in the draft, and then he didn't play much his first couple of years. Having John Collins out of the way has been huge for him. And he is showcasing why he does have all-star potential and why he's already a decent starter. Like, granted, I know Atlanta is not a good team right now, and most MIPs are on good teams, but based off the actual definition of the word, I don't think there's a more improved player in the NBA right now than Jalen Johnson. And last but not least, so Minnesota and OKC is kind of terrorizing the awards for me this year. Mark Daigneault is the head coach of the year. If I'm going to give Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for leading a young team, I'm going to give the guy the same thing. Not only is OKC young, not only are they talented, but they're disciplined. They're one of the best two-way teams in the league, top 6 on defensive and offensive rating. They don't turn over the ball, and that is a testament to good coaching. I don't care how talented you are. If you are a team that doesn't turn over the ball, you're well coached. And OKC is young, so that only elevates that point that they're well coached, and they're the most overachieving team in the NBA this year. They are super young. Even the bench, they don't have a lot of veterans on the bench. They are reliant on guys like Keeson Wallace, who's a rookie. They're reliant on, they're reliant on Aaron Wiggins. They're very young on the bench. They're very young. So the fact that they're this disciplined, we saw them against Minnesota recently. They're a more disciplined team than Minnesota. And 2 of their 3 best players are in the middle or back half of their prime. They're the younger team. They're the second youngest team in the NBA, but there's not many more mature teams than Oklahoma City right now. It's that simple. He's the coach of the year. And that is my awards for this season at this point of the NBA season. And let's go transition right away to Pascal Siakam to Indiana. And so first of all, on the surface, when you hear 3 first-round picks and Bruce Brown for Pascal Siakam, somebody who's on the final half of his contract, first thought is overpay. Siakam, in my opinion, is around a top 40-ish player in the NBA. Maybe a number 2, but more likely a number 3 on a championship team. He's on a short-term contract. And when you look at short-term contracts, usually you don't get a lot for stars on short-term contracts. Look at what Jimmy Butler got traded to Philly for, right? It was Robert Covington and Dario Saric. That's kind of the expectation if you are on a short-term deal. But I do think the difference here is Pascal Siakam is planning to stay there. I think that is clear because Indiana's probably one of the few teams willing to give him that money over 5 years. That's the big difference. And then you also look at, okay, my mind's spinning right now. You also look at in this trade like the first-round pick value, right? Because, 3 first-round picks a lot, but it's 2 2024 picks. So you only lose control really over 1. It's from other teams that you traded them for, especially including one that's the worst of 4 teams. So 2 of the picks are not that valuable, and you only lose like really any trade leverage over 1 pick. So that isn't that bad considering you're planning on keeping Siakam. Bruce Brown's a short-term inflated contract. So Indiana got good value here. They got a guy who's guaranteed top 40, somebody that they can integrate right now. Tyrese Halliburton is too good to suck with. Usually when a guy's that young, you would consider like the Pistons with Cunningham, like, okay, we can draft a little longer and stuff. Tyrese Halliburton has been a top 6 offensive engine in the NBA this year. You're not going to suck with them. So might as well lean into winning with him. When you got him, Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, you can go on and on. You throw Pascal Siakam in there. They are in the playoff mix firmly for the next few years. And you also consider the fact that they didn't give up many young players, right? Because they didn't give up any. Bruce Brown was in the trade. And they kept Benedict Mathurin, who is somebody I still think has all-star potential. Jarris Walker, I think he has good starter potential. Aaron Nesmith, I've really liked what I've seen from him. Obi Toppin, I do believe he's a system player, but he fits the Indiana system. So they have, I didn't even mention Nembhard or Isaiah Jackson. They got a solid core of young players. So it's not like they are going all in on this window. Then all of a sudden we're in Mathurin's prime or Halliburton's prime, and he has nothing. They have a core that they can groom while winning in the short term with Siakam and Turner. And Halliburton is so good, he fits those both timelines. So Indiana, they have a number 3 and a number 2 at the very minimum. I'm not sure if Halliburton is a 1 or 2 on a championship team yet. I still need to see like players that archetype don't win a lot of championships. They really don't. Those one-way guards who don't really, like Steve Nash doesn't win championships. Chris Paul hasn't won championships. Like that archetype, it's hard to win a title with historically, but at the same time, he might be an exception. What he's doing when he's this young, you can't really ask more. He might be a number 1. I believe in Halliburton. I think he has the killer in him. I question the half-court creation still a little bit. Minimum, he's number 2, and he might be a number 1. And as a number 2, you can still be a sustainable playoff team with a number 2 leading you. And Siakam, I think he's a 3, but he might be a 2. So you have 2 of the 3 pieces at the minimum. And if Mathurin and Walker could develop a little bit and become like really high-end players, and Halliburton is who they think he is, Indiana might have something brewing here. So the upside's very considerable. The floor is pretty high, assuming Siakam stays. And overall, I think it's an A- trade for Indiana. And you look at Toronto, dude, he was on the final half of his contract. Like, what did you expect? I mean, 3 first-round picks and Bruce Brown's good value for Pascal Siakam at this point in history. I've always been saying that Toronto messed up. Masai Ujiri messed up because anybody with half a brain can sense that this core wasn't going to work. And last year, they had the opportunity to get in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, a French player in a country that is very French-speaking. He had that opportunity to take that step back last year. Deal Fred VanVleet, deal OG, deal Siakam. I promise they would have gotten more if they did that. Now, granted, I think they did well in terms of Siakam. 3 first-round picks and Brown at this point in history is more than I thought they would get for Siakam. OG for Barrett and Quickly is good value. I'll give them that. But at the same time, they could have gotten more last year. And this last year was just a better draft. Toronto, their pick this year is top 6 protected. So they might not even have their pick this year, and they're rebuilding. Like last year, they operated so poorly with this roster that I still can't get over it. Now, on this current circumstance, they managed it pretty well. They got decent value for what they had right now. But I still say they messed up last year so bad, and because of that, I'm going to give this trade a C+, B-. The actual value of this trade is an A- or an A. But because I can't get over it was so freaking obvious to deal Siakam last year and deal VanVleet last year and then deal OG last year. It was so freaking obvious. I'm going to hold that against them. They messed up. And then they get Pirtle, solid player. But they deal a first-round pick too to get him. And granted, this year's draft is not as good. Look, there's another French big man who might go number 1 in Alex Sarr, and he's good. He's not Victor. You hope he's Evan Mobley. You know? Like, Sarr is not a number 1 pick most years. I like Nikola Topic a lot. There's questions about as a below-the-rim finisher who's not a great pull-up shooter. There's questions about that. Ron Holland, I like him more than consensus, but there is a G League history building of them not working very well, and his offensive skill development has ways to go. So there's a lot of questions in this draft, and they picked to take less value this year in a worse draft with a protected pick that they're praying goes top 4. You see? So I just think it's not unrecoverable. Scotty Barnes has become the star I think he is. RJ Barrett's going to be good. I think IQ, I really like the OG trade because I think IQ has borderline all-star upside. So I'm not saying it's unsalvageable, which is why they get a passing grade. But I still think last year was such a golden opportunity, and they messed it up. So Indiana managed it well. Toronto, on the surface, solid trades. As a matter of fact, they got 3 first-round picks potentially this year, which gives them a lot of leverage if that pick goes top 6. So they'll have opportunities to build a young core, but they had a better opportunity last year, and I'm telling you, Victor Wembanyama and Scotty Barnes would have been a dream. And it didn't work out. Even if they didn't get Scotty, they could have gotten Brandon Miller. They could have gotten Scoot Henderson. They could have gotten last year was a very good, very deep draft. Even though guys like the Thompson twins, I was always a little lower on. They need a lot of time. There's a lot of good players in last year's draft. So I'm still mad for Toronto because I love Masai Ujiri. But, hey, for now, fine value. Now let's start talking about contenders in the NBA. So I listed out 7 teams that I think have a chance to win a championship this year. 7. And at this point in time, midway through the season, how I feel about these teams right now, if the playoffs started today, this is how I'm ranking them, okay? So number 7, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. They're French contenders. They're not – here's the thing. They're below average defense. They still have among the worst point of attack defenders in the NBA And I do believe it's nearly impossible in a guard and wing league still, a league that is still reliant on perimeter skill, to have weak point of attack defense. They could address this at the deadline and they rise in the rankings. But right now, they barely have the makings of a title. I think Damian Lillard has slightly regressed this year, even though he's coming off of 41 points. Still a star, not a superstar. Their interior defense is very good. I don't trust their point of attack defense. And I think that is going to be their Achilles heel in the playoffs. And I'm very confident they'll get beaten by one of these teams ahead if the playoffs started today. Number 6, Philadelphia 76ers. They could be higher on this list because they're more complete than Miami or than Milwaukee. They got more size in the perimeter. They got a lot going for them. They do. Honestly, the reason why I had them 6 is because I like these 5 teams ahead better. I can't hate on Philly too much. There's always questions about Joel Embiid in the playoffs. This is Tyrese Maxey's first time, being a true second option in the playoffs. Granted, he's been really good in the playoffs early in his career. So that's only like a moderate concern. Their bench, question a little bit. I still question Tobias Harris as the third option. There's some minor things on this team that, I do think they are legitimate contenders. I do think there's a world they win a championship this year because Embiid's great, because Maxey's a flipping star, because they do have good perimeter length. They got a lot going for them. But they're 6. Number 5. Hurts me to say this. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're 5 right now. They got the second best record in the NBA right now. By far the best defense in the NBA right now. They got, in my opinion, the second most valuable young star in the NBA in Anthony Edwards. I think Anthony Edwards is a generational player. I think Rudy Gobert, best defensive player in the NBA. I think Naz Reid, I think he's the best bench player in the NBA. I think they got the best point of attack perimeter defensive rotation in the NBA today. If Milwaukee had Minnesota's point of attack defense, they would be by far the favorites. But they don't. Minnesota has the best point of attack defense in the NBA. Ant, Jaden, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson. That is a suffocating group of 4 guys in the perimeter. Their offense is efficient when they shoot the ball. But the problem, 28th in turnovers, 30th in the last month, dead last in turnovers the last month by a mile. Their late game execution is still a question. Their best player is 22 years old, and as special as I think Anthony Edwards is, right now he is not ready to be a number 1 on the title team because he's not smart enough late games yet. Yesterday, he missed 3 straight free throws in clutch time. He has a turnover history late in games. I don't worry about Anthony Edwards, the shot maker, late. The free throw thing doesn't concern me. Minnesota, the question is going to be how quickly can they resolve the turnovers? If they can resolve the turnovers this year, I still think there's a path Ant can ascend to a 1A in season. I do think he's one of those very special players who can take another leap in the season. I really do. But he's got to do it. At this point in time, Minnesota is not built to win a title. Not like the other 4 teams ahead. They're just not. So that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at. If Minnesota can figure out the turnovers, they're up there. But they're not right now. Number 4, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I told you guys how much I like them. They do it on both ends. They're mature. They got the best guard in the league. They got the second best rookie big since Tim Duncan and Chet Holmgren. They got Jalen Williams, okay, I got a section about OKC in a future section. I'm just going to say my questions. Oklahoma City needs to, I still question, is there enough veterans on this team? And I question their size. I can see them get beat up by Minnesota or Denver in the playoffs. And also, how do these young players respond in playoff time? Are they going to be as composed as they are in the regular season? Maybe. That's why they're top 4. But I got to see it before I put them top 3. Number 3, Los Angeles Clippers. They've been elite the last couple months. When you look at roster construction, they're as good as anybody. Because what do they have? They're big. They're lengthy. They got perimeter. They got perimeter length. They got shooting. They got two-way wings. They got a good big. They got a good bench. They got James Harden is one of the best passers in the NBA. They had a playmaking problem in the past. They had a health problem in the past. Both have been addressed so far this year. They've been playing healthy, and they've been playing smart. They have playmaking now. I'm always going to question their health. I'm always going to question James Harden in the playoffs and Paul George in the playoffs. The Clippers haven't proven as much as the other two teams ahead, but it's hard not to believe what they're doing right now. What they've been doing has been excellent, and there is a path for them to win a title this year. Like, Harden is not a bad playoff performer, but he has come short in big situations. Maybe as a third guy, that it becomes easier when there's less pressure. And I honestly think that's a fair bet. But yeah, they're 3 right now. I need to see them in the playoff setting together. But Clippers are definitely exceeding my expectations because I was out on them for a long time. Number 2, Boston Celtics. Yeah, Celtics. Jason Tatum, I still question, is he a 1A or a 1B? Does he have that Kobe thing in him, or does he have that Anthony Davis thing in him? What I mean by that is Kobe Bryant was a two-way wing, right? But he had that extra juice to him where he can just show up in big moments and just grab a game by the balls. We've seen Tatum do that. We've seen him drop 50 on a game 7, but we haven't seen that consistency. And I still question, is he a true killer? I don't think he folds in big moments. I don't think it's that he lacks a thing. So being a 1A on a title team isn't about what you lack. It's about that extra juice. That is a bonus. Does Jason Tatum have the bonus? That's my question. And also, this team's also injury prone. The playmaking, I do question a little bit. They don't have any elite playmakers on the roster. I think White can pass a little bit. I think Holiday can pass a little bit. I don't think they have a true floor general, and that's a question. But they do have the most talented roster in the league. And Jason Tatum might be a 1A. He's only 26 years old now, I think, 25, 26. So it's not like, Giannis didn't figure out until he was 26, 27. Nikola Jokic didn't. Even like LeBron and MJ did it. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for Jason Tatum to be a 1A. I just need to see it. But I do think it's possible that he can be a 1A, which is why they're number 2. Because I think it's possible still. I'm very confident Luka Doncic has that extra FU in him. I'm very confident Anthony Edwards has that FU in him. I don't know if Tatum does, but if he does, Boston should be 1. And number 1's Denver. Got to respect the champs. They are the first team in the ABA merger era that didn't have any second all-star or all-defensive players or DPOYs or any awards on the roster around the one all-star. That's a question. But Nikola Jokic is great. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. And Jamal Murray is that second all-star in the playoffs. And I trust Aaron Gordon enough. I trust Kentavious Caldwell-Pope enough. I trust Christian Brown and their developing bench enough. They have good bench scoring with Reggie Jackson. I trust the core enough to say they can get it done. And it's easy to say because they won the title last year. So Denver's 1 for now. But honestly, the gap from 1 to 5, 1 to 6 is not that. The Bucks are fringe contenders. They're kind of distant from the other 6. But I think OKC is going to be consistently in this range until I see them in the playoffs. If Minnesota figures out the turnovers, they might be top 2, top 3. There's some questions. This could change throughout the year, but at this point in time, this is where I think NBA teams stand on who has a chance to contend, win a title. And now let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Once again, I've talked about them a lot this episode. They deserve a lot of attention. And I have a hot take, very hot take about this young core in Oklahoma City versus the one that was around a decade ago before James Harden got traded to the Rockets. I think this core might be better than that KD, Harden, Westbrook trio. I think Chet, SGA, J-Dub is better. And I think they're going to prove to be better, potentially. That might sound nuts. I'm not saying that they're all going to be better individual players. For Christmas' sake, KD, Harden, and Russ are all MVP players. I'm not saying that they're better, but I am saying in terms of just long-term trajectory, I think Chet, SGA, and Jada make more sense. Westbrook, Harden, KD never made an all-defensive team. They never did. KD was the only one who was a semi-decent defender in his peak, and his best defensive season was in Golden State, not in Oklahoma City. This Thunder core is better defensively. Chet is a future all-defensive player. I think Shea might be a future all-defensive player. J-Dub is no slouch defensively. Those three are better defenders than all three on the other side. And there's two sides of the ball. And offensively, I compared the stats earlier. Peak SGA might end up being as good as peak KD. And he might end up being that. Just based on what we've seen. What Shea is doing on both ends of the floor. I mean, the scoring numbers, the efficiencies all lining up. Shea's the better playmaker. That might be like 101 equal. But then I think Chet and J-Dub fit around SGA better than Westbrook and Harden. I don't think because of how high maintenance Westbrook and Harden were at their peak, they would have been able to fully complement each other. Whereas Chet doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective. J-Dub can get his in the flow. And I think as they become higher usage players, they could do it in a way that's unselfish, that doesn't like clash. I think eventually, if Harden and Westbrook were determined to become the best version of themselves, that trio could have clashed. I see less potential for that with this current OKC core. And look, man, they're smarter. Oklahoma City this year is among the best in the NBA in taking care of the basketball. In the year OKC made the finals in 2012, they were bottom 10 in turnovers. So this OKC core, I would say, is higher IQ. I think that the talent isn't far off. I think all three, Chet, SGA, and J-Dub, are future All-NBA players. SGA is a future MVP. He's my MVP pick right now. And by the way, he's the MVP pick right now with all three of those guys active on the roster. Just saying. Harden wasn't on the Thunder when KD won MVP. So I think this core complements each other better. I think they do it on both ends better. And I think that they take care of the ball better. And I think all that together, if we are accumulating the overall effectiveness of a trio, not just looking at individual players, individual talent, I truly believe that this Chet, SGA, and J-Dub core is going to be better than KD, Harden, and Russ. It's built for more sustainability, and I think the peak is as good. And now to finish off this episode, I am going – oh, no, I already did Midseason Awards. What am I talking about? I want to close out this episode talking about the number one picks in the last 5 years because I think we are truly in a historic stretch of first overall picks. Might end in 2024 with how bad they're saying this draft is. But right now, I think this core is at – what was I saying? Oh, yeah, I think this recent 5 years is as good as we've seen. Let's look at the facts. So, historically, 11 Hall of Famers, number one overall. 31 total in NBA history have made an all-star team. So, when the NBA is around 80 years or so, like if you did the math on average, so about 2 in every 5 years, you're going to have a bad or number one overall pick. So, that's kind of the mean. So we're going to operate off of that. So like a good stretch of number one picks, if you get 4 in 5 years, that's pretty good. And historically, there's only a few times that's like really happened. I mean, I'm going to just mention some of the most notable historical number one overall pick. There was a really good like 7-year stretch in the 80s. That's probably the best ever right now. Mark Aguirre went number one in 81, and he was like in his third year, he averaged 29 a game. James Worthy, Hall of Famer. Rob Sampson, Hall of Famer, I think. Hakeem Olajuwon, all-time great. Patrick Ewing, Hall of Famer. Brad Daugherty, perennial all-star. David Robinson, all-star. That's the best group of number one overall picks of all time right now, in my opinion. And you can go into the 90s, and there's a pretty good stretch where it's like Derek Coleman was a star. Larry Johnson, star for a couple years. Shaq, all-time great. Chris Webber, perennial all-star, Hall of Famer. Glenn Robinson, star. Joe Smith, dud. But Allen Iverson, Hall of Famer, that's a good stretch. right? Only one really bad in 6-7 years. And then you can go again in like the early 2000s. And that was kind of like a bad stretch. It was like Andrew Bogut, RJ Bargnani, and Greg Oden went number one overall in 3 straight years. So he didn't have an all-star for 3-year stretch. That's a horrible stretch. But right after that, it was Derrick Rose, Blake Griffin, John Wall, Kyrie, Anthony Davis. Maybe not one all-time great in that group, like a couple Hall of Famers. Maybe AD's all-time great. You can argue that. That's another really good stretch. That's probably the second or third best stretch. I think this stretch the last 5 years has a chance to not be far off from the one we saw in the 80s, where we had 7 straight all-star caliber players and 3 all-time greats. I think we this 5-year stretch might have something like that. And I know I technically said 5-year stretch and I mentioned 6-7 year stretches, but I didn't want to ignore some of the other guys who are really good around that time too. But look at this stretch, guys. 2019, Zion Williamson. Not that I believe he's going to be an all-time great, let alone I don't even think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't trust Zion, but he averaged 27 in his second year. He could be a better version than Larry Johnson, right? A better Larry Johnson. That's possible. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good result. 2020, Anthony Edwards. I think unless something very, very unfortunate happens to Anthony Edwards' career, I think he's on track to be an all-time great. I think 2021, Cade Cunningham. I could see perennial all-star there. Totally. 2022, Paolo Banchero. Anybody knows how I feel about Paolo, they would know I think he's a future MVP. Therefore, I think he's a future Hall of Famer. I think Paolo is that special, truly. That special. Paolo is not far off of Ant. That's how I feel about Paolo. I think when you're that big and he's that versatile and that powerful and that coordinated, once he figures out the finishing, which I think he will, I don't know how the heck you guard him. And obviously, Victor Wembanyama is the best prospect in the world, in my opinion. And I think if everything comes together, he will be the best player in the league. So in this 5-year stretch, it's very possible we have 5 All-Stars and 3 guys who are MVP caliber players. I mean, early 80s, that stretch, only Hakeem. So Hakeem, Ewing, and David Robinson were kind of the 3. Let's cut out Worthy and McGuire. So Ralph Sampson, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, Brad Daugherty, David Robinson, right? I think Ralph Sampson. Okay, my light died. I tried to charge it for a few minutes in a little stretch a couple minutes ago. But what was I saying? I think that Zion and Ralph Sampson, they could have similar careers. I can see Hakeem, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson. I can see Ant, Paolo, and Victor being comparable or even better in terms of career success than those guys. And then Cade, I can see as a Brad Daugherty type talent. That is the best number 1 overall pick stretch in NBA history, it looks like. In terms of consistency and having multiple Hall of Famers, I think this 5-year stretch that we're seeing recently, Zion, Cade, Ant, Paolo, Victor, it has a chance to be as good as any of those. Truly does. And I think we're getting spoiled with how good these number 1 overall picks have been recently. All of them have been excellent. Not one of them has been a huge dud at number 1. Even if one, Zion's been a little disappointing. Not a dud. He's been good, really good. When he's healthy, he's excellent. I think this stretch number 1 picks is as good as it gets. And I think we might get spoiled about it in the next couple of years. But looking back, I truly believe that we're going to look at this stretch number 1 overall picks and say, this is one of the greatest we've ever seen. And that does it for the What's on Tap NBA podcast. I'll be back soon. This is Wilder Adams. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully I'll have a guest on this next episode so we can get more, another side of the story, another perspective on situations and just different takes. But we'll get that soon. But in the meantime, once again, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.